Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Max, and I am here talking Marvel Crisis Protocol once again. Today, we're actually talking about the tiers, or kind of like the power levels of the current characters in Marvel Crisis Protocol. Look, there's a little bit of leeway on here. There's a lot of 8.5 characters floating around. There's a lot of characters that aren't necessarily good by themselves, but because of a particular ability or maybe in conjunction with another character, they're significantly better and consequently can go up or potentially down tiers based on kind of the team that you take them with. But I'm going to break down on what we've got here. So the S tier, in my opinion, are relatively overpowered. They probably could have been tuned down just a little bit. If you take these characters, they're very high threats. They do their jobs very, very well. And you definitely need to be careful when around them. Now you'll notice things like Red Skull, maybe Miles Morales in there. There's a couple reasons that certain powers they have can drag them up. They are obviously leaders of their affiliations, and I personally believe that maybe those affiliations are a bit strong and should have gotten tweaked just a little bit more. But look, I'll jump straight into it. Let's check it out. S tier first up. This is number one. If there was like an SS tier or an S, you know, 1.0 elite hyper edition, we have M.o.d.o.k. He is, in my opinion, probably the best character in the game. He hits as hard as Hulk. He's as tanky as half the crew. You put a bodyguard next to him, and he's never dying. Large base with small movement still gives him exceptional movement around the field. He's not super power hungry. You put him in the right affiliation, and he can just take over a game and become such a huge threat that if you don't deal with him, he'll win it by himself. Simple as that. So that's definitely why he's number one. Death chairs alone is something that is ferocious to behold. Baron Zemo, another really, really good character here. Having rerolls is not something that's crazy common within Marvel Crisis Protocol, and in my opinion, it's almost like getting an extra dice. So simply having Baron Zemo around, all of your characters get an extra dice when attacking and defending as well, which is absolutely huge. Giving him the long movement as well also definitely pushes him over the edge of that power level. Charge is just like the cherry on top of that. Charging along, moving into attack, absolutely crazy. Venom, surprisingly tanky. I mean, you can target him down with some energy attacks. So look, that can shift him down into that A tier. He's probably like an S.5 or A+1 type tier. I think he's very, very strong. He's showcased in a lot of metas. He's prevalent on a lot of teams. Being at the 4 threat means he's not crazy high threat, but you do have to build around him as well. So I think relatively balanced, but definitely up there on a little bit. Red Skull, I know it's probably a bit of a shock for most people to have Red Skull in their S tier. I think Red Skull himself, he's got free energy, free power gain. He's got some movement around for other people. His attacks are pretty good, plus his own kind of bodyguard utility definitely brings him into that kind of lower A tier. But the Cabal affiliation in particular, I think, is crazy overpowered. I think it's ludicrously good. Not having it a once per turn scenario, it means whenever an attack resolves. So a lot of your characters are getting two power or 1 power from their attacks. You're doing whirling chairs of death on M.o.d.o.k, and you're attacking multiple different people, resolving those attacks, getting extra power from the one attack, and having a second action on top of that as well. So I think the Cabal affiliation actually drags Red Skull from that A tier definitely into the S tier. I think it's crazy powerful. Thanos, I think they've done actually a really good job of balancing Thanos. I think he just squeezes into that S tier. Obviously, he's a crazy high threat character. You bring in a ton of gems on him and make him a kind of 8 or 9 threat, and that definitely balances him. But giving people 2 extra dice for 2 power with the power gem just means that everyone's always getting free dice left, right, and center. His affiliation of getting extra victory points just for killing your opponents as well. I think you'll see Corvus Glaive and Proximate in the A teams. You bring those in with the Black Order crew, and you can just be killing people around the board. So I think, again, the affiliation, where Thanos is probably an A tier character, obviously because he's got a very high amount of threat, his affiliation probably just squeezes him into that S tier. I think if you build a proper list around him, he can really, really be taking over games. Miles Morales definitely fits into that category. He himself is probably an A tier character. You'll see in a video I made recently with my man Bill, Miles Morales being able to kind of like move himself, attack someone, then shift back onto the objective, meaning that he can kind of get out there, disrupt people quite a lot very readily, and still maintain position on objectives. And being able to re-roll his dice whilst on objectives, including skulls, I think, again, crazy, crazy powerful, getting a ton of free re-rolls across the entire team. and being able to reroll skulls definitely shifts him into that S tier. Look, again, quite possibly an A+1 or an S.5 sits into that middle ground where he's not crazy overpowered, but I think his affiliation definitely pushes him over the edge. And I think that's a common theme you'll see across the board. The affiliations, if they're powerful, you'll definitely see those people get pushed up a tier. So look, jumping into the A tier, I think the A tier are definitely very, very strong. All of these characters are super playable. You wouldn't necessarily be wrong not to include them in your team, but I think you will see in most teams 2 to 3 of these characters pretty readily. So that's kind of what that A team is. Most commonly played, very, very strong in what they do, very obvious in what their game plan is, and complete that game plan very, very well. So Thor, look, again, being an Asgardian himself, Thor himself is very close to S tier in my opinion. Again, another one of those kind of like A+1s or S.5s. Very, very tanky. When he flips over, he actually gains more health as well, which is great. I think he goes from 6 health to 8 health, or maybe he goes from, I think he goes from 6 health to 8 health, so he actually gets tankier on the flip side. Hits like an absolute truck, not crazy power hungry, has the Asgardian affiliation as well, so he's getting the extra power as well, so he's never feeling like he's lacking that power level, or to kind of use his abilities and use his team tactic cards and things like that. So I think Thor, again, really, really, really high on the A tier. Very, very good character. Uh, Captain America, I think personally, the character himself is actually quite weak. I don't think he's an exceptionally strong character. He probably needs a bit of extra tank factor or maybe a bit of extra punch. So he's definitely kind of a B tier character in my mind. But again, that affiliation of Avengers taking over that superpowers, I think he's crazy strong on a bunch of other characters. The difference between like Avengers and Cabal is you can do it multiple times a turn. Avengers is only once a turn. So that definitely kind of lowers him out of that S tier. I think if he had that more than once a turn, suddenly he goes into S tier straight away. Just from the affiliation alone, the character himself is probably, quite frankly, a B tier character. So look, Corvus Glaive and Proxima, I think they're both functioning very well by themselves. If you have an individual on your team, they go to like kind of that B+1 or A.5 tier. But together, being able to kind of, wife of Corvus or husband of Proxima, I think that brings them into A tier. You'll see these two people together quite a lot. Even though they can function very well by themselves, I think together, crazy powerful. They could just take over a game by just pointing at characters and killing them. I spend 2 activations, but I guarantee that you lose an activation, so you kind of net even in a lot of that kind of area. Ebony Maw, I think, having 6 Mystic Defense dice and using his superpower to gain all of that defense whenever he wants, that by himself is crazy strong. Always having 5 to 6 defense dice, provided you have power on him. But again, he's gaining 3 power returns. We can just sit on objective and have 6 defense across the board. Very, very strong. Also attacks very, very hard. So really high defense that you don't notice as much because it kind of costs power, but it's still there. And the attack on the flip side, really, really strong. That's why I think he's an A tier. Again, possibly a B+1, A.5 tier. But in the right hands, obviously being 5 threats, crazy huge. You're comparing to him things like M.o.d.o.k and stuff. But I still think very, very, very strong. Could definitely take over games. Okoye, I am incredibly impressed by her every single game she's in. She has 3 defense across the board, but she's re-rolling 1. If she's in range 2, she's calculating blanks. She's also got bodyguard. Her attacks are surprisingly strong as a 3-threat character, as a 2-threat character. Is bonkers. She's easily a 3-threat character in my mind. The fact she's 2-threat definitely pushes her into that A tier. And I think very, very solidly in there. You're going to see her quite a lot being bodyguards for your M.o.d.o.ks, your Red Skulls, even honestly taking hits for Hulk and making sure that when Hulk, you want him at a higher level attack or health damage to get those attack dice, but then not dying on the same spot. I think Okoye is really good with that. So she's actually a really well-rounded, tanky, offensive character. Obviously, you have a big set of focus fire on her from a distance. She'll crumble. But again, putting her in the right hands, I think, very, very powerful. Loki, again, he's a trickster. He's frustrated. He gets in the way. He's a really strong character in the right hands. Again, you put him in a correct position. Again, next to Okoye, where he can't necessarily die or get taken off the board. You put a bodyguard next to him, and he's just frustrating everyone, making superpowers cost more, getting out of the way of attacks and things like that as well. Obviously, he doesn't have a lot of power sinks. His attacks aren't crazy, but he's always there. He's always frustrating you. He's always making you cost more for your superpowers. He can get out of range of attacks, forcing them to spend power when they don't want to. So he's sticky. He'll definitely die to focus fire. And if he's low on power, he's definitely very weak. But you get a good set of power on him, and I think he does a bunch of work. Doesn't work as well in the Cabal affiliation because he doesn't want to be in range to attack as much. But still, very very solid A tier character. Um, We've then got Starlord next to that. Starlord to me is very easily an A tier character. He has huge range on his attacks, really, really powerful energy attacks. He doesn't do a lot of fancy stuff. There's no crazy things here. He's got flight, which is pretty nice. He can take a power gem as well if he really wants to get that extra kind of power generation going. But really, he just sits there from a distance and just shoots you. And he shoots you really, really well. Was it range 4 attack, like 6 dice or something like that? His full auto is like 7 dice, and he gives you a bunch of effects from like stunned to bleed conditions. He is just a powerhouse. He's 3 threat, shoots really well. Like he could easily be a 4 threat character, and that puts him kind of maybe into a B tier. But being 3 threat easily solidifies him in A, shoots really well. That's the trick. Shuri, really, really good at 3 threat. I think she's a very hard character to use and possibly sits in the B tier just because the skill cap on her is quite high to utilize. So in the wrong hands, easily a B tier character. But otherwise, in the right hands, solidly an A, can push people away, just shrinks little bits of damage here and there. Not a big heavy hitter, though can at some certain times, but just constantly pushing you off objectives, frustrating you, getting you out of the directions you want to be, putting you not in the position you want to be. I think she's really, really good, again, in the right hands. Ghost Rider, I haven't had a chance to play around with him, but looking at his card, 5 threat character again, really, really big heavy hitter, but he is a high threat killer. That's what he does. He takes out really high threats like Thanos, like Hulk, like M.o.d.o.k. He takes these really high threat characters and just takes them out of the game. He just turns around and says, my 5 threat's better than your 5 threat. Also, I'm going to kill someone while I'm here. His cards making him come back multiple times means you can turn your 2 threat like a Koye. So you've got a Koye, she's dropping down to low health, almost about to flip or whatever it is. They're also trying to target down Ghost Rider because obviously you want to kill the Ghost Rider as soon as possible. He's just throwing himself in the middle of fights, kill Ghost Rider, pop him back. Oh, hey Black Widow, hey Okoye, remember how you're back there? Back in the fight, you thrive that character's back in the field. So you can be really, really aggressive with him, really thrown into fights. 5 threat could be interesting. Again, might drop him down to the B tier just because his threat's so high, really hard to kind of build around. But crazy, crazy strong. I love this character. I'm really, really excited for him. I think he can do some awesome, awesome stuff. Ghost Spider fits in with kind of morals. I think being part of the Web Warriors affiliation, getting all those rerolls definitely increases her power level. Her attacks are really good. She's got quite a bunch of stuff she can do. Very power hungry. So look, maybe again, much closer to that A.5 B+1 style tier. But yeah, disruptive, good chunk of damage, can throw down status effects really, really well. Heaps of really good movement as well. Black Widow again sits in that kind of position where just really good at holding objectives. She's got health, stealth. She's slightly tankier than normal. Two threat character. So all 2 threat characters, get almost a +1 rating just for the sake that they're 2 threat characters. 2 threats such a little amount of threat. I think she's really, really strong. Hard to kill, takes objectives. Pretty simple. In the right hands, can just score 2 to 3 victory points a turn, depending on what the mission is. And yeah, for 2 threat, that's crazy. What can you ask for anymore? Again, you couple with someone like Ghost Rider, where she just sits in the back, taking objectives, being a nuisance. Ghost Rider's in there, flailing his whip, dying, and then just comes back and says, Black Widow, thanks for your efforts, but your soul's now mine. I'm going to run back into this fight and keep killing. Green Goblin, really, really cool. I think being the Spider Foe affiliation definitely raises him into this A tier. Otherwise, probably closer to a B+1 B tier. But the Spider Foe affiliation is really, really good, where you get to reroll your opponent's defense dice. Keep in mind, if you're really rolling one of your 7 attack dice, like, yeah, that's pretty good. But if your opponent gets successes on the defense dice and you can re-roll them, I think that's crazy strong. It means that if they've got run defense dice, you can potentially bring it down to 0. It's similar to having a pierce across the board on your characters. So I think that's actually really strong and in the right hands. Very, very powerful with your things like Venom and stuff like that, where they can't modify their defense dice anyway, and then being able to also take out one of their shields. Very, very, very strong. Solidly A tier. Similar situation to Doctor Strange. Having 5 threat on him I think his 5 threat is pretty strong. His abilities are pretty crazy. He's kind of somewhat power hungry, but I think his faction ability of stopping critical hits, turning them into fails, and not adding because of critical hits, that's super, super strong. I think Hex or Incinerate do something like that. Ghost Rider does that ability where he cancels out your crits. I think that is ludicrously powerful. So that affiliation ability alone easily puts him in A tier. Obviously, being a 5 threat, bit of a hurting one, stops him probably from being S tier or anything like that. But you'll definitely see him quite a lot. I think you'll see the Defenders affiliation coming in really strong with him as well. Hawkeye, really interesting, solid A character. He's an interesting one. He sits in kind of the B or A tier just because he only has one attack, which is a bit of a problem. But he's not power hungry. The attack doesn't cost any power, so he can spend a lot of it on his movement. So he has a lot of free movement around the board. He's always just taking little, dinks with his bow, just shooting off people, hitting some wounds, taking objectives. Really, really hard to deal with, and he gets a lot of free attacks as well. So again, not a ludicrously high power character, but at 3 threat, he's just taking objectives and shooting people. What more do you want from a 3 threat character? Now going into the B tiers. B tier is interesting. I think these aren't necessarily bad characters or even worse characters than the A tier. I definitely think the A tier is probably stronger than a lot of these guys or girls for that matter. But they need to be built around a little bit more. You can't just throw them willy-nilly into a team. You've got to put a lot more thought. A lot of the A tier characters you probably can just throw into a team without too much thought. And you say, oh yeah, I'll fill up the affiliation or I'll put a little bit of stuff. You don't just go crazy with your workaround. You just need to hit a couple easy check boxes and you're good. These characters, I think you definitely, they're very situational in teams. You definitely need to be building pretty heavily around them for them to really excel in the game. But again, not bad. Maybe the skill cap is a little bit higher. And I think definitely how good a character is based on how high you can hit the skill cap without a lot of skill yourself. A very quick example I'm going to throw into this is Groot. I'm going to jump straight into Groot and Rocket Raccoon. Groot, perfectly fine by himself, really solid tank, can spend a bunch of power at one point to really take over a turn. Rocket Raccoon, again, can spend a bunch of power, do a bunch of stuff. Without Groot, though, Rocket's very, very weak. And if you can ever push or pull or shift Rocket away from Groot, you can just kill Rocket, and he's dead. There's nothing he can do about it. He's very, very squishy. Just pop him and gone. He needs to be around Groot. Now, again, if you're a really, really high skill cap player, you can play around those two together. You can possibly shift them around so they can always be together, so they've always got that defense. But you can spend 3-4 turns really kind of making yourself restricting yourself in your ability to play the game by having these two together and performing their actions. And all it takes is for me to come through with a push. Shuri, come through, 3 threat character. I'll push Groot away, small. Great. Now he's nowhere near Rocket. Cool. Second character comes in, kills Rocket, dead. So the skill cap in order to disrupt those two is much lower than the skill cap for those two to actually succeed in what they can do. And I think that's the big difference between B and A tier characters. The skill cap is much higher for a very, very similar reward. Now, jumping into Killmonger, I think he follows a similar build to Baron Zemo, where he gets to charge and attack. Obviously, in the medium movement, he can stagger up the game really, really heavily. So, as the game goes on, he gets stronger and stronger and stronger with his kills and rerolls and extra dice and stuff like that. But Baron Zemo just does that without having to do anything. The game starts and Baron Zemo's there. Killmonger is 4 threat and has to work towards it. Now, he can definitely take over a game at some point, but there's a lot of protection. You have to give him a lot of work. You have to build up towards it for it to be good. Black Panther, similar situation. Obviously, you've got the Wakanda Allegiance card, which allows everyone to attack. He himself has the Wakanda Allegiance, which I think is fine. Not crazy strong, but definitely fine. I can see him being one of kind of the 10 in a semi-Wakanda affiliation where you're taking like a Killmonger and an Okoye and a Shuri anyway in potentially the crew. So when you see your opponent's crew, you see that they've got a lot of status tokens they can give you and stuff like that, and suddenly Wakanda's actually pretty good. But yeah, I like his leap's really good. He has long movement across the board, always really strong. He's definitely a huge tank, so he does a lot of these things well. But he just doesn't attack very well. Considering he's the Pink Panther, he's the Pink Panther. He's the Black Panther. I don't think his offense is very strong considering what he's at. So he just doesn't have as huge an impact as you want. And again, that affiliation of Wakanda is very situational. It's not just a static, really good ability. It is situational. I think that's what drops him down from an A tier down into a B tier. He's a solid B. Killmonger definitely can be a B+1, 8.5 style character. Big fan of Killmonger. Hulk, again, you just have to build very heavily around him, and he can just get targeted down with some energy attacks. Very similar to kind of Venom. Venom's big weakness is energy attacks, but Venom has the ability to heal back up. and constantly be a threat. He gets to attack you back on his turn. Hulk is, Hulk smash, and if you move him first, then they're just kind of pile on all the attacks so he doesn't get the benefit as much. Then maybe at the start of the next turn try and really kill him. At that point, Hulk maybe gets to daze one of your characters, and then you finish off Hulk. Great, you've spent, 6 threat to daze a character because I've pumped my entire team into it. Yeah, you can argue there's a lot of different things, like obviously them focusing Hulk is not focusing on other things, but when Hulk gets taken off, 6 threat gone off the board, you know. I think now with people like Ghost Rider, who can like take away power and things like that, Ebony Maw taking away power, I think Hulk requires a lot to really make work and be strong. And he can definitely take over a game, but that's the big difference between B and A tier. Has to put a lot of work into him to make him as strong as he should be, arguably. Valkyrie fits in the slot as like Baron Zemo and Killmonger. 3 threat, awesome, but doesn't have that power generation, doesn't have the ability to do crazy cool stuff, doesn't get as many rerolls and things like that. Obviously, being an Asgardian affiliation, getting the extra power to definitely organize those attacks. Really, really cool. But otherwise, yeah, just nothing fancy. Just jack of all trades, really, really solid. Definitely not an A tier. You won't see Valkyrie in every single list, but if you see Valkyrie in a certain couple lists, definitely going to be strong. Look, the Wasp, we haven't played around with her too much. I actually think she's probably a B+1, 8.5 tier. I think she attacks really, really well. I think the ability to actually drop objectives on the people that you want is ludicrously strong as well. Wasp obviously changes from small to large, and has large movement as well. So that combination of large movement, potentially taking an objective, running back, dropping an objective, giving it to Hulk or Thor or Venom or someone that's much harder to kill, to maintain holding on to that objective. Really, really, really strong, really powerful, and can actually attack really well. Has stealth, so can defend pretty well, and I think gets to reroll a bunch of defense dice as well from the tiny stature. So again, all of these things make that a B+1, maybe even A tier. If I play Wasp a couple times in a game, which I definitely will, I can definitely see her getting pushed into A tier, quite frankly. Winter Soldier, I think probably, I'm not sold on Winter Soldier. I know a lot of people definitely love him and have used him very, very powerfully, which is why I guess I put him in that B category. Having the ability to just jump into any affiliation definitely solidifies him in that B tier character. But again, that means that you have to build around him. You've got to build your character base around him. You've got to build your team around the fact that you're kind of throwing him. I don't think you can necessarily be like, oh, I'm down 3, I'll just throw him in there. Having a huge long range on attack is really strong. He's got like range 4 or 5 on his energy attack. And when a character next to you dazes or KOs, you can also attack. So being able to attack people on opponent's turns, also very, very strong. But not crazy tanky. I can just shoot him off the board pretty readily, in my opinion. Or at least daze him pretty quickly. Because he stocks down to 3/3/3, threat 3. But he doesn't have a huge amount of health. He's got like 5 health or so. And no real defensive ability. So attacks pretty solidly, maybe just above average. Defense, very, very, very average though, and a medium movement. Again, you put a long movement on these people, and suddenly they jump straight up into 80s and stuff like that. But you obviously can't put long movements on everyone. That's crazy. Groot, I spoke briefly about him. I think Groot by himself you can play pretty readily. That's a B tier character. He's super tanky. He can heal a bunch. He can get in people's way. He can punch pretty hard. He's very, very solid by himself. That's why Raccoon's kind of in C, because if you put them together, maybe they become a B.5 or B+1. But again, so much effort to make them function together. Hela, B tier. I think the best way to explain Hela was she does an awesome, unique thing, but that people do that job in a slightly less unique way and better. Arguably even for less threat as well. So whilst she does her job well, I think people do her exact job better, which is more or less killing people. I can take my 3 or 4 threat characters like Baron von Zemo and do a similar job to what Hela does. Though again, she does it more in a unique, fun way. The thematics of that is obviously there. Being an Asgardian, being able to add to that affiliation definitely makes her quite strong. I think being an Asgardian in itself is crazy cool and very strong for the Asgardian affiliation. Jumping into Gamora and Nebula, both very, very interesting, both very unique characters. Gamora, I haven't been a huge fan of. Nebula, I think, being a 2-threat character, can fit into a lot of different lists pretty readily. She's just an assassin. She can come in and potentially kill someone really, really strong. I've tried playing them both. I saw them kind of tag team together, similar to kind of Corvus, Glaive, and Proxima Midnight. I battled Bill in a game, and he was like, cool, I'm going to activate them both. We're going to move, we're going to attack, we're going to do all this stuff. I'm like, cool, I copped like 2 or 3, maybe 4 damage. There wasn't a huge amount of power from them, but their defense just turned around and said, out of here. You know, I'm a doomsday cherry with M.o.d.o.k, which isn't a good example because he's obviously very S tier, but I think relatively squishy can definitely get killed. The fact Nebula can't take objectives, I think she probably needed to hit a little bit harder, considering how squishy she is. So can't take objectives, very squishy, takes a solid amount of attacks, but probably needs to be either slightly more tankier or slightly more offensive to really make up for the fact that she can't take objectives, because this is a very, very heavy objective-based game. Drax, I played Drax once. I absolutely loved him. I think you need to play around him pretty heavily. He's probably kind of like a C+1, B.5 tier character, because he is, I think he's only 3 threat, which is pretty good, because he does attack really, really well. I just think for an extra threat, someone like Killmonger does that job a bit better. Baron Zemo does that job a bit better. So unless you're really looking for like the Guardians affiliation, which is kind of fine, not crazy unsold on it, not crazy sold on it. But I do think, like, you know, you get your Vengeance procs on. If you can make him tanky enough, again, you put like an Okoye next to him to bodyguard, or someone else to kind of bodyguard it, so he can take a hit, but then not completely die from the hit, and then he gets to come back and swing hard. Is kind of where that threat comes in. But Killmonger gets to do that on his turn to guarantee it. That's the interest. He doesn't need to be attacked. He can just come in for the extra threat, attack, and then attack again, like a charge that attack, get like 6 to 7 dice on the attack, potentially moving up to 8 or 9. Drax can get to kind of like 8 attacks, but unless you kind of meet all this criteria, he's down to like 4 or 5 attacks. So still pretty tanky. He takes 1 less damage, I think, when getting attacked, which is awesome. I think it's an awesome ability on all, like, kind of Corvus, Proxima, Thanos. All of those guys take 1 less damage, which I think is huge. And Drax definitely can be surprisingly tanky because of that. But again, that's what the B tier is. You're playing around. You've got too many ticks that you need to hit to really kind of make them excel in their role. Vision. Again, I think that the skill cap for Vision is actually quite high. He's probably like a B+1, A.5 tier character. But he's just like kind of complicated for the sake of complicated. He can do a lot of really cool stuff. Switching from energy to physical is really, really strong. Again, I'd probably keep him in the crew of 10. And if you see someone like a Venom or a Hulk come through that have weak energy, being able to throw him in that slot and really play around with the physical versus energy attacks is very, very strong. His attacks aren't weak by any means, and he's not crazy power hungry, which is also interesting. He can just kind of get free power. Like, he's a medium power hungry character, but he can get the power as he requires it, which is huge. But yeah, again, just got to do a lot to really make him function properly. You got to play around. You got to build a team around him. Very, very high skill cap character, and I think others just do that job at 4 threat arguably better than he does. Like, at 4 threat, I'd rather be taking Killmongers to just take you out of the game. I'd rather be taking Venoms to be, you know, that tanky attacking force to be reckoned with. I'd rather take the Loki to kind of really, you know, play around and disrupt your team. We've then got Drax. Drax, obviously, you'd probably be taking the Power Stone on Ronin the Accuser, not Drax. We've got Ronin the Accuser here. Haven't played around with Ronin, we'll straight up admit. Read his card. He seems interesting. Again, punches pretty hard, has a couple of hoops he's got to get through. Because he could take the Power Stone, they've obviously upped all these power costs, because you're probably going to take the Power Stone on him, which again puts him at like a 5 threat character. 5 threat mean you're looking at M.o.d.o.k. You know, you're trying to compare him to M.o.d.o.k. You're trying to compare him to Doctor Strange. And I think when you're in the league of those 5 threat characters, you've got to be powerful. You've got to do some crazy stuff to really showcase yourself, and he just doesn't. He can definitely punch really, really hard. I'll give it to him. He'll hurt some people, but at 5 threat, so will M.o.d.o.k. M.o.d.o.k's going to do that real well, you know. So, yeah, cool character, pretty unique. Maybe too many hoops to kind of go through, but again, if you can get that off, really, really, really strong. Black Widow, Agent Widow is definitely a very, very similar. Like, her interrogation ability, 3 power, you gain extra VPs. I think that can be game changing. That can win you a game on the spot, especially if you're looking for a very VP-focused team, like maybe the Spidey affiliation, very VP and objective-focused teams, a bunch of low-threat, multiple characters around the board, very good affiliation, or very good kind of team comp to be playing around objectives. And I think if you can just turn around when you can see the turn happening, be like, cool, I know what's going to happen. I've got these objectives. I can push them around. They're still a turn away from potentially killing me, and I need, you know, 6 to 8 victory points, and boom, she comes in and says, cool, here's 3 extra victory points for free, go for it. You know, here's 2 or 3 extra victory points. Put yourself on 15 out of 16 or 16 on the dot and win from that. So again, very high skill cap, but I think probably a B+1. 8.5 tier character, so pretty strong in that one. Look, going into the C tiers. C tiers is like they just haven't found their role within the game. Maybe they take too much to really get going, or maybe someone just does their job better. That's kind of what this C tier is about. You'll see people that play him because they love the characters. You'll see them because people think that maybe they can do some really cool stuff and unique stuff with them, and go for it. 100% gonna be awesome for you. I love to see that kind of stuff. I love themed games. I love choosing characters for the sake that I want to put a theme around it, and I think Marvel Crisis Protocol does that really, really well. But maybe like in a competitive standpoint, maybe not the craziest. Ultron, his flight ability is pretty good. He can throw pretty well. Pretty high power costs, so he's not really cost effective in that sense. For a 4 threat character, I kind of expect a bit more from him. I expect like he takes less damage from physical attacks and things like that, and the energy hits him hard, so he's surprisingly untanky if that makes sense, because you think he's going to be tanky, but then someone hits you with a non-physical attack and suddenly he's a lot less tanky. Um, and I think like he could have done a bit more. Maybe his attacks could have been a bit stronger. Maybe could have given him a much more unique feel about being kind of the evil overlord. Because I love Ultron. He's one of the first characters I painted up when I bought the core set. But again, just people do his stuff better. At 4 threat, I'd rather be taking someone like Venom. I'd rather be taking someone like, for the 6th threat, I'd rather be. Oh, I guess it's 7th threat. I'd rather be taking like the Corvus and Proxima combination. Because that's something that does Ultron's job plus a bit better. His movement's pretty solid because he's on a larger base, but again, at 4 threat, there's just other characters I'd rather be taking for his job. Black Dwarf does a similar thing. He doesn't fit too well in the Black Order affiliation because he's the big tank. But they're all tanks. They all take 1 less damage when getting hit. He hits mildly hard. He doesn't have a crazy powerful thing. Like his job is just done better by honestly Okoye playing a bodyguard role that's surprisingly tanky. Venom, lethal protector, getting in the way and then healing off the damage. At 4 threat, we've got honestly, I'd rather just take Starlord at 3 threat to just shoot from a distance. And if I'm playing him in the Black Water affiliation, I've got him shooting from a distance, and then my front line just tanking it all up. I don't need this extra super unless he was crazy tanky. Huge defenses like four physical, 4 energy, and maybe like 3 mystique or something. Like unless he had these huge defenses with a huge health pool and maybe attacked a bit less, and he probably just sat on objective and just said, "Come near me, I'll fight you." But not quite there. A lot of people that do the role better. Miss Marvel, look, I haven't. Oh, sorry, Captain Marvel. I haven't played her, but I've played against her, and I just wasn't. I wasn't shocked by her. I wasn't surprised. For kind of Captain Marvel, you think that Superman-esque of the series, she'd do a lot more, and she just doesn't do a lot. Unfortunately, her attacks are fine, but there's better attacks. Flight's obviously very good. Her movement's solid. Very, very power hungry, like crazy power hungry. You've got to almost give her a power stone to not to kind of go through that, and obviously you can't do that. So that's her big downfall. Huge power hungry. Ant-Man definitely seemed pretty cool. He's got a free movement, which is absolutely huge. Don't get me wrong, but it's a medium movement, and I think Wasp just does what he does, but better in almost every way. Wasp hits harder. She doesn't get a free movement, but she can move when attacking guaranteed. She also has the long movement, so the long movement almost makes up for the free movement that he gets. Obviously, his movement still costs power and things like that, whereas hers, she gets to attack and then move as well, so she can actually attack people and then move on to objectives past them if she so needs, or attack them and even move backwards onto objectives as well, which is pretty huge. So I think, unfortunately, Wasp definitely just does a lot of what Ant-Man does, but better. So that's why he's probably in the C tier. Again, I've gone through Rocket a couple times. I think by himself, he's kind of trash. He's almost D tier by himself because he just dies instantly. And yeah, he can hit hard, but you've got to get your power going. You've got to put him in the right position. If someone just fires a stray bullet and accidentally hits him, he's going to die. So yeah, but putting him with Groot definitely brings him into that C, kind of C+1 tier, because I think if you can get the Groot Rocket combo in the middle of the board where you get to attack 3 different people and fire like eight shots each. It was like 24 attacks across the board or something. I think that's crazy strong, but got to be in a position where, again, you got to get him with Groot. You got to have him not die. You probably want a Baron Zemo to help him re-roll. You've got to play your tactics card. You've got to get your power, so he's got to probably take a couple damage to get the power to hit the level that he needs to hit. Like, so many different things to get him going that just... it's rough. It's real rough. D tier, these are characters I just don't think are good. I think this is interesting as well because Crossbones was actually one of my favorite characters at the start. But there's definitely people that do their job better. They shouldn't really be in a team. I can understand people being thematic in what they want. Or I definitely can see people being thematic in what they want with them and playing them in that type of team. But yeah, I just don't think they do what they need to do. Like Spider-Man, Miles Morales does everything better, you know, and he's less threat. I think Miles is 3 threat, not 4, you know, whereas Spider-Man being 4 threat, he definitely needs to be a 3 threat, you know, just straight up. The way that he affects the board is a 3 threat character. Not a 4 threat character. I'm just gonna double check. Miles Morales 3 threat. You know, 3 threat for Miles versus 4 threat from Spider-Man. Miles Morales does almost everything better than Spider does, and he's one less threat, and he's got the affiliation of Spidey friends, where he's the leader as well. Like I think that's crazy. He just doesn't do enough anywhere near the long movement. Don't get me wrong; is absolutely massive. Long movement is hugely powerful, but it's just people just do his job better, unfortunately. And I know that sucks for all you Spider-Man fans out there. I know Bill, he's a huge Spider-Man fan. So I'm terribly sorry, but that's just how I feel about it. Doc Octopus again, I think he's got like a small movement, so he can't get around the board very well. He can throw things awesome, which was cool in the starter set, but other people can do that too. He is 3 threat, so that's his saving grace. I'm just going to quickly jump on his card because I haven't seen too much about him. Dr. Octopus is up here. I haven't seen too much. I haven't seen him in games. I don't think he's crazy powerful. He's got like a throw. When he rolls dice, he can gain a power if he's at least 1 crit. But like 4 attack on his core. If he can attack again. Sorry, he gets extra successes on wilds, but like that's not consistent. That means you look into spikes. So he doesn't attack very well. He can get some power on spikes again. So he's a really spiky character, and a 3 throw, range 3, throw it small, size 2 or less. Like there's characters that do that for cheaper power significantly better. Like 3 Klingar's Rage on Venom. Again, 3 power is size 3 or 3 or less, and can throw it medium. That's all strictly better than that ability right there. So and for 1 extra threat, understandable. So not sold on Dr. Octopus. Crossbones definitely suffers from movement. He has short movement. Again, if you can put him in a perfect situation, I had a wonderful moment with Crossbones where he moved, punched, got to move within range 2 of the punch, and then punched someone else as well because he rolled all the fanciness and got the beautiful things. He used the card to get extra dice and stuff like that, and was really good there. So too much that has to happen to make him really function as a character. So that's kind of why he's there. Having small movement on a small base as well is it's just garbage. It's so trash. You can just sit out of the game forever. If I put him on a side rather than on a flank instead of the middle, and I set my opponent sets all their enemies up on the other side, like he's never getting into the fight. You've spent 3 threat on a literal nothingness. Iron Man, look, he's got a couple cool things. Having him a medium movement instead of a large, I think, is such a disservice to Iron Man. It's terribly sad for him. And I think, as one of my favorite characters in the Marvel universe, he was done a huge disservice to. I think I'm hoping they release a new Iron Man skin at some point that we get to see, like the Hulkbuster as well as other things, because I think that's going to be really cool. But he's got some interesting attacks. He's got some pretty long range attacks. He's not crazy power hungry, but medium movement. He takes 1 less damage on attacks. He's not super tanky. He is a 3 threat, but again, he's lackluster. He there's kind of people that do his job a bit better. Like Starlord, I would probably take Starlord over Iron Man 9 times out of 10. Maybe if I'm really desperate for the Avenger affiliation, but I'd honestly almost take Winter Soldier over Iron Man for the event for the 3 threat Avengers affiliation. Star-Lord is 4 range with like six dice or something like that for an extra power. Iron Man, yeah, he can get to like 7 or 8 dice, but it takes him, AI Friday, he's going to spend like 4 power to do it. He has no real reason to be gaining extra power other than attacking. But again, just so many hoops you've got to jump through, so much power you need, which means you've got to get hit first to gain the power, put in a position where he can just get killed to make sure he can actually attack someone properly. And that's kind of why they hit that D tier. There's just characters that do their job, but better. So look, that's my tier list. Comment below. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm correct. Tell me who you think should be in different areas. Tell me who you're excited for as well. Unfortunately, Wong isn't on this list because we haven't had his cards spoiled, so I can't check it out properly. But we've got heaps of new cards coming out. We've got Kingpin, Punisher, so many new characters that are going to change this list up pretty heavily, which is awesome. Very, very excited. All the X-Men have to jump on this list somewhere as well. Mystique, Beast, all of that stuff coming through. Wolverine, Sabretooth, Cyclops, Storm. Oh, Magneto. I'm ludicrously excited to see how these guys and gals fit onto this list and see what they're going to do in game as well. So please like, share, subscribe, comment, check it all out. I'm doing these videos all the time. I'm doing battle reports with my mate Bill weekly on Wednesdays. We're going live on Twitch, and we've got those videos coming up all the time as well. So check it out. Stay safe out there. Stay healthy. My name is Rover McManus. Say hi to your mum for me. It's actually Max. But much love to all. I'm going to throw you over to Ali, and she's going to tell you how you guys can check out all our social media, including our website, generalgames.com.au, where you can actually pre-order all of these products. We ship Australia-wide, because I'm a Victorian boy myself, and we're about 20% plus below RRP. So some of the best prices on the Australian market as well. So love you all. Stay safe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Hey guys, it's Ellie. If you like that video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more interesting content. You can also follow us on Facebook for more information and events. Likewise, follow us on Instagram for those behind the scenes photos and videos. See ya!